most likely this morning's class will be significantly shorter than yesterday. Yesterday we didn't get to take questions, and there was a plan to take the questions this morning. So that's what we're going to do first. Can you give him a microphone? And then we'll begin this morning's class.
So the first question, Vibhishana's wish for path of virtue makes me think, was he in some kind of sattva guna independent of Supreme Personality of Godhead?
Was who?
Vibhishan.
Independent of the personality of Godhead?
Yes, because he was in sattva guna, so he's independent of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Would it be the correct to think like that?
No. I don't know why you're even asking the question. He's, even before he was born, his father said to the mother, your youngest son will be a person of virtue. So how disconnected? I don't understand the question. Do you understand the question?
I think that is it just a karma yoga kind of sattva gun, or is it connected to the Supreme Lord through bhakti? I think that's the essence of the question.
Was his virtue due to karma yoga, or was his virtue due to bhakti? That's the question.
That's my interpretation of the question, Guru.
There is gradual elevation for everyone, including Vibhishana. However, the seed of bhakti was there. Now, where did that seed of bhakti come from? Certainly something from his previous life, of some inclination towards, but one can also understand from his father. So we're going to be discussing about Vibhishana this morning, and so we'll cover this topic a little bit more. But it wasn't just karma yoga or material piety, and then he became a nice devotee. It was the seed of bhakti that was nourished, we can say, doesn't explicitly describe this, but it comes from somewhere, and from his father. Next.
From Bhagavatam, we learn that Brahmana's downfall had started when Shringi cursed Maharaj Parikshit. But here we see that Ravana was a Brahmana, but his activities were not Brahmana-like. This time period was way before cursing of Parikshit Maharaj. How do we understand if Ravana's behavior was so because he was supposed to fight the Lord and he was just manifesting Lord's will, or it was also a part of downfall of Brahmanas?
No, it's not downfall of Brahmanas. He's not ushering in Kali Yuga. That's not the fact. Let's just take, for example, Ajamila. He was a Brahmana, and by bad association he became fallen. That didn't start the whole of Kali Yuga. It's describing the principle. The principle is even a Brahmana, through bad association, can become corrupted. And that's what happened in the life of Ravana. Now, it was pronounced by the father of Ravana that he will be, because of the inauspicious time in which you approached me, your sons, 2 sons and 1 daughter, will be terrible demon Rakshasas. But that wasn't just because of that. It was added to that. Ravana, became further, he got the association of his father, but he became further corrupted by his father, his wife's father, so father-in-law, and he became corrupted by bad association, further corrupted by bad association. But it's not a mark of the issuing or entrance of the age of Kali. It's just iterating a principle. A good person, a Brahmana by birth can, or by even by quality, can become corrupted by bad association. It's just illustrating that principle. don't connect it with Kali Yuga.
Right. If curse number 5 and 6 are sequential,
If what and what?
curse number 5 and 6, you talked about the different curses,
Okay.
Ravana. As per curse number 5, Ravana should die during the scene of curse number 6, where he misbehaved against a woman.
Yeah, I don't know about the chronology. I only know that they're listed, and which chronologically happened before the next one, I don't know. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to begin personalities from Ramayana part 4. So far we've discussed the author of Ramayana, Valmiki. And then we discussed Hanuman, of course. And then Ravana, and then his diametrically opposite brother, Vibhishana. Now, yesterday evening there was a question, and let's that I'd like to. If the person who asked the question, the first question yesterday evening, is attending, please respond somehow to a chat box or something, or text message by WhatsApp or something, so that we know that the following is something that you agree to. And if you're not online, Satyasar can ask him. So the question that was asked, first question yesterday evening, led to a larger discussion. The question was, is a woman, what is the varna of a woman in Vedic culture? And then it went to Gotra. And then we had this, nice discussion about the child. The child takes on the Gotra, or the Varna, of the father or the mother, and there was a discussion about that. And one of the questions Purnamasi raised was Vidura, because he was born of a Shudra mother, he was considered Shudra or not Kshatriya. But then it's a mix, because I was thinking this morning, Maharaj Shantanu, with his wife Ganga, had a son, Bhishma. There was Deva Vrata became Bhishma. Then there was a second wife, and the second wife was a fisherman's wife, fisherman's daughter. So she wasn't Kshatriya, she wasn't Brahmana. She was, we can assume, by family occupation, was Shudra. But her two sons, Vichitravirya and Chitrangada, were considered Kshatriyas, which means they were taking on the occupation of the Varna of their father, not their mother. So the request of the person who asked that first question yesterday, I don't, my apology, I don't have the time, because I'm on a marathon to prepare all of this for President Full, all the personalities. It's massive time investment. I don't have time. So the person who asked the question, or pass it on to someone, or create a team, or do it with a partner, or somehow do research on the following two questions, and when you're satisfied with the end product, send it back to all of us. So the two questions are your question and the second question. The first question is, in Vedic culture, what is the varna of a woman? And you could add, what is the varna of a man? Is it based upon, that's the second one. The second one is gotra. According to Vedic culture, how is gotra determined? Just leave it, no. Because it may be there's different rules, and I'm not familiar with those rules. So this devotee that raised the question yesterday, please agree or find someone who can answer those two questions in a reasonably researched, doesn't have to be a PhD paper, but a reasonably researched response to those two questions. I don't need to repeat the questions. So let's move on. Vibhishan is the emblem in the Ramayana of not just goodness and virtue, although that was the pronouncement, but his outstanding quality, the acharyas that write about Ramayana, particularly the Sri Vaishnava acharyas, write extensively about Ramayana, and they say in elaborate terms, the whole of the Ramayana is a treatise on surrender. I'll say it again. The whole of the Ramayana is a treatise on surrender. Just a little background. The spiritual master of Ramanujacharya was Jamunacharya. Jamunacharya wrote and taught extensively to one of his disciples who was related to Ramanujacharya, father-in-law, something like that. And he taught that extensively to that devotee whose name is escaping me at the moment. And then Sri Shailapurna became the carrier of Yamunacharya's teachings on this topic. Sri Shailapurna taught it extensively to Ramanujacharya, who taught it extensively to his followers, and his followers then wrote extensively on Ramayana as a treatise on surrender. And there's a document that Govindaraja, we mentioned his name previously, he's a 17th century Sri Vaishnava personality who was instructed by the presiding deity in Tirupati in a dream to write commentary on Ramayana. So in his commentary on Ramayana, he includes this document or the statement, this iteration of the 18 principles of surrender. And outstanding in those 18 principles of surrender is Atmanivedana. We'll touch on it shortly. It's number 6 out of the 18 in that list by Govindaraj. But Atmanivedana, we know from our ISKCON perspective, this is one of the limbs of surrender and limbs of rendering devotional service, the topmost, number 9. And so it's described that Vibhishan represents this. And characteristic of that representation is when he was accepted, which we're going to be discussing in this morning's class, at Tirupalani, where he joined Lord Ramachandra, abandoning his brother, and Ram decided to accept him. He said in Valmiki Ramayana, abandoning Lanka, friends and possessions, I place my kingdom, life, happiness at your disposal. It's similar to, in ISKCON, we're familiar with Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Sharanagati songs. And on the Atmanivedana section of his Sharanagati songs, Manasa Deha Geha Yo Kichumora, everyone knows that one. So it's full surrender. Everything that's in the category of mine is no longer mine. It's yours, and I am yours. I am at your disposal. The 18 themes from Ramayana, as I just mentioned, Govindaraj writes in his commentary on Ramayana. It's number 6, dependency of on the devotees of the Supreme Lord as exemplified by Vibhishana. So that's not exactly Atmanivedana, but he was in a very compromised situation. I mean, extremely compromised situation. Something at a different age, of course, than Prahlad, but similar to Prahlad in the company, an exalted person, fixed in knowledge of the Vedas, and fixed in righteousness and so forth, in the company of wicked people. Not only Ravana and Kumbhakarna and Shurpanakha, his immediate family members, but everybody else. So, pretty challenging situation. Some of you may find yourselves in a challenging situation. Think about Vibhishana when you feel bad for yourself that you're in a challenging situation. Think of Vibhishana and take shelter of Krishna. So this is a slide that we saw yesterday, and take a look at the top. This is Kashi approaching the person who would become her husband, Vishravas, to accept her and to give her children. And Vishravas, you see in the painting at the top, he was doing fire yagya. And so he was interrupted in the midst of his fire yagya, which is not supposed to happen. And so he said, you approached me at inauspicious time. Yes, I'll fulfill your desire, but your children will be cruel and horrible demons, except the youngest one. And so the lower register shows the 10-headed Ravana. Behind him is Kumbhakarna. Behind him is Shurpanakha. And then seated on the lap of Kaikashi is Vibhishan, a little baby there. And there's his ashram, Vishravas ashram. So, leaving out Shurpanakha, the 3 sons, we heard yesterday about Ravana and his characteristic. We heard a little bit about Kumbhakarna and his characteristic. This is, he had a giant body, and this is the Rakshasas trying to wake him. Elephants stomping on him and banging on instruments and hitting him with sledgehammers and picks, and with a big pile of food ready to feed him as soon as he wakes up. So Kumbhakarna was a big guy, and also a cruel person. But he had some sense of virtue beyond at least that of Ravana. And then their younger brother of the 3 is Vibhishan, and he's our topic for this morning. He's an inspiration. There's many lessons, practical lessons in life from the life of Vibhishan. It was pronounced before he was born there would be an emblem of virtue and righteousness, and that was the case. Both Ravana and the other 2 brothers engaged in austerities, and they had very different interests. Ravana's interest was to there's Lord Brahma, who gave the benedictions after their 1,000 years of austerities. Ravana's was very intense. The painting shows at least quite similar to the austerities of Hiranyakashipu. But his ambition, his sankalpa, was he wanted to rule over the 3 worlds. And the ambition or sankalpa of Kumbhakarna is he wanted to sleep. So he received that benediction. And Vibhishan wanted to always serve the Supreme Lord. Now here specifically in the translation, Vibhishan stood on one foot for 5,000 years. Excuse me, it's not 1,000, it's 10,000. And when his vow was completed for yet another 5,000 years, he gazed steadily at the sun, standing with his arms raised above his head and his mind fixed upon Vedic recitation, because he was the son of Vishrava, so he learned the Vedas from his father. He knew Vedic mantras, and he was reciting Vedic mantras. That was his thing. It was his personality. And when Brahma offered his benedictions, may every thought that I may have in each and every stage of life in this world be supremely righteous, and may I always uphold the righteous conduct appropriate to every stage. Now there are different Ramayanas, different versions of what was. We gave a slightly different one yesterday. This is what he said, according to Valmiki Ramayana. And Vibhishan, along with taking a role in the rule of his elder brother, because this is part of Vedic culture. The younger brother or brothers, they assist and serve the elder brother, as the Pandavas did. So Ravana, Kumbhakarna, Vibhishan did. Vibhishan had 4 ministers. They were always his careful attendants and assistants. There's Vibhishan and the 4. Anila, Hara, and Sampati. He eventually became married, and the Valmiki Ramayana says his marriage was to Sarama. Sarama was the daughter of Shailusha, a great king of the Gandharvas. And in the course of this entire personalities of Ramayana, there's going to be something dedicated to her, because she plays an important role besides being Vibhishan's wife. She plays an important role in a number of ways. We'll find out as we go along. One of the first incidents that we hear about Vibhishan's function, you see him pictured here, seated next to his brother. Now, Kumbhakarna was asleep, so that's not Kumbhakarna, but maybe that's supposed to be Kumbhakarna. He wasn't sitting in the throne. He was asleep. When Ravana heard from Hanuman, who was he and why was he here, etc., etc., and Hanuman spoke very directly and boldly and accusingly, Ravana was infuriated. He wanted to kill him. But Vibhishan intervened, and he reminded Ravana that messengers are not to be killed. Sometimes when one party sends a messenger or an envoy or an emissary to another party carrying a message, and if one may not like the message, but you don't kill the emissary. Don't shoot the messenger. That's our modern expression. Even if, because the Vedic codes say, even if the messenger may have caused destruction, you don't kill him. But the codes, he had indicated that he can be appropriately punished. So there was some conversation, and it was decided, okay, we'll set his tail on fire, because monkeys are very fond of their tail. So the arrangement was rags were gathered, soaked in oil, and lit. At least this painting shows Ravana personally was soaking the rags attached to his tail. And we know what happened after that, because we're just focusing now. Later we'll focus on Sundarakanda, but this is just focusing on Vibhishan. So after Hanuman set Lanka on fire and so forth, and then departed and, killed so many generals and so forth and so on. There was a get-together in the royal assembly. Ravana called for his ministers and those that guided him to give him counsel what to do. I'll just briefly describe the 3 times. After the first round of asking Prahasta and this one, that one, and they were all bragging and boasting about their power and his power and why you worried, you're so powerful, and you just weren't ready and were caught by surprise, and no worries, or just let me and I'll take care of him and the whole army myself, and bragging about their powers. Then Vibhishana spoke. And Vibhishana spoke in favor of returning Sita, saying what was done has retribution, cause, according to the Vedas, and Ram is very powerful, listed ways in which Ram is powerful, and it's not a good idea to invite war with Ram. Ideal would be just Sita is returned and make friends with Ram, and everything will be nice. So Ravana didn't slam him at that time, but he, dismissed the assembly, went to his own chambers. And the second time, privately, just the 2, not in public assembly, but Vibhishana came to speak with Ravana, and in a very respectful, humble manner, expressed basically the same thing as you see in the painting. There's Lord Ram, and Vibhishana is aware of Ram's, not his divinity, but his power. And, virtue always wins over vice. And again, expressed, good idea would be to not provoke a war, because the course of not returning Sita means war. And he spoke very nicely. And Ravana didn't like what he said. And then the third time is when they went to the larger assembly. Now, this doesn't show a larger assembly, but there's some assembled assistants of Ravana behind him and to the left and so forth. He's very submissive to his elder brother, and again, there's all this rabble-rousing of, we're powerful, and don't worry, Ravana, let's go. Who's more powerful than us in the whole universe? Why are we even having this discussion kind of talk? And Vibhishana said, any minister that just flatters the person who they're ministers of is not a good person. They're not a good minister. They should look carefully at the circumstance and give advice, wise advice accordingly. And this kind of advice that you're receiving is very bad. And reiterated the point that Rama is very powerful, and the detail of his discussion is very nice. It's worthy going through Valmiki Ramayana or Krishna Dharma's Ramayana and hearing what he said, at least in a summary way. But because of time, I'm doing it in this very quick manner. Ravana didn't like it. He was really angry. So right in the public assembly, he insulted him and kicked him in the chest. And at that point, something like what Vidura did when he left the palace. He just left the palace. Now he had mystic powers. And so he just rose from his seat following behind him were his 4 ministers, and he made a beeline for where Ramachandra was. This was his intention anyway. Like Vidura, he was doing his best to give wise counsel to his elder brother. And when it became very clear that his elder brother was not able or unwilling to receive good counsel, his service to his brother was over. And he left. Interesting. He didn't go say Hari Bol to his wife. He didn't take his cell phone and typewriter or the computer. He just took off. He left everything. Now, good news for her. She eventually becomes the queen. So it wasn't just disregard. It was just the circumstance. He couldn't bring her with him. So there he is. Most of the images show what happened. He was still hovering in the air. He didn't come in for a landing. Now this shows he's directly speaking with Lord Ramachandra, and that's not exactly how it happened. There's Ram, Lakshman, and Sugriva and Hanuman in this painting. But it wasn't, Ram wasn't there, Lakshman wasn't there. He spoke to Sugriva, which is appropriate. You don't go directly to the big person, you go to you can say the secretary or representative of the big person. And it comes out later in this whole exchange. This is a big part of the feature of Ramayana. This place, Tirupalani, is a place where there's surrender. It happens several times. It's noted for this. So here's another drawing. There's Vibhishana and his 4 ministers. Now this particular painting doesn't show, or drawing, doesn't show Ram and Lakshman, but it's Sugriva. And he makes this request. He says who he is, and why he's come, and could you carry a message to Ram and ask him if he would give me shelter? I want to become his servant and devotee. So that's pretty significant. And Sugriva is quite uncomfortable with the whole thing. And Sugriva and the others present their doubts about Vibhishan to Lord Ram. Ram, as a king or a leader, will do. He consulted his ministers and his leading generals. So after making that inquiry, Ram asked them, what's your advice? Now in the upper right corner, you see there's Vibhishan and his 4 ministers. And in this painting, you see Sugriva in the front, and you see Jambavan and others. And so there's a long section of what they say. And Sugriva, he's skitterish anyways. Remember, when he saw Ram and Lakshman, he was like, who are they? And I don't trust them. And he has that side to him in his personality. So he was expressing in various ways. So there's a long, long description. Different persons said different things. Send him back, try him out, watch him, test him. There are different suggestions by different people. And finally, Hanuman speaks. And he listened. He didn't speak until spoken to. Ram wanted to hear from him. So when spoken to, then he responded in a very beautiful. It's worth reading it. Those of you that have a Ramayana, read it. It's nice. He, one by one, he goes through the objections of different people. One of the objections is he's got a motive. He knows that Ram's going to win and Ravana is going to lose. And he wants to become the king. And Hanuman says, so what if he wants to become the king? So he has a personal motive in behind his surrendering. That's okay. Let him become the king. He's a virtuous person. And he says many things. One can see from his countenance, he's to be trusted. And Hanuman is a really, really good judge of character. And then finally Hanuman says, I know Ram, and he's already accepted him. So we don't need to have a discussion. What's Ram going to want? So then, before Vibhishana is brought forward, he's still hovering in the air waiting for the reply. He speaks this celebrated verse that is in Ramayana and is quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. If you want to make note of the verse, you can look it up. The Sanskrit is there, just as it's in Valmiki Ramayana. Ram declares, this is in the matter of surrender, it's a big deal for the Sri Vaishnavas. And the understanding of this resulted in the split in the Sri Sampradaya from Ramayana. The split in Sri Sampradaya, one of the factors of the split, it has to do with the ontology of the soul, and it has to do with the method of surrender. One group says it's an ongoing process, another group says it's a one-time surrender, prapati. Anyway, here's the verse. It is my vow that if one only once seriously surrenders unto me, saying, my dear Lord, from this day I am yours, and prays to me for courage, I shall immediately award courage to that person, and he will always remain safe from that time on. It's a long discussion about how to understand that properly and how to not misuse it. But that's what Lord Ramachandra said. And then after that, some further discussion back and forth, and Sugriva says, well, wait a minute. And Ram addresses his concern, and Sugriva then accepts. He says, you're most magnanimous, and you're most powerful, and you're most wise, and I accept. Then, significant, Ramachandra requests Sugriva to personally go and invite Vibhishana to come forward. Because don't just say, I have no problem. Put your actions where your words are, and go to Vibhishana. And one of the reasons given is because it was through Sugriva that Vibhishana desired to take shelter of Ram. So he does. He follows Ram's instructions. He goes to Vibhishana, welcomes him, and Ram accepts Vibhishana's surrender. This is a very significant part of Ramayana, because previously Vibhishana was never acting against Ram. It was Ravana who was acting against Ram. But he didn't just insult Ravana. He tried his best and tried his best and tried his best to correct the incorrigible. And when the incorrigible was very clearly incorrigible, he left and took shelter of Ram. So it's a lesson in what to do when circumstances are difficult. It's not the only thing to do, but it's what Vibhishana did. And then full surrender to Lord Ramachandra, Atmani Vedana surrender. Ram accepts him. And there's some nice paintings because it's very important. There's Vibhishana bowing before Ram and Lakshman. And there's some of the Vanara chiefs right behind Vibhishana. And then behind him, 4 strange-looking personalities who are his 4 ministers. And here's another nice painting of the same. And of course, Ramachandra is in the front with Lakshman and Hanuman and other Sugriva, etc., behind him. And then there's Vibhishana and his 4 ministers. Nice, very nice painting. Very nice painting. Here's another. It's kind of like a comic book illustration type of thing. Vibhishana surrendering. Here's Vibhishana surrendering with his 4 ministers behind him. That's, the ocean behind them to the right. And, this is one of those paintings where multiple things are depicted in the same painting. Here, in other words, we see Vibhishana offering obeisances to Ram and Vibhishana offering his obeisances to Lakshman. And Lakshman giving his blessings because Ram has given his blessings. Again, the 4 ministers, Vibhishana surrendering to Ram, and Lakshman standing behind Vibhishana. Ram decides right there on the spot, make Vibhishana the king. Now it happens again after Ravana is killed, but it's ceremonial. And Ram knows the procedures and he follows the procedures, and he's now the king, the incumbent king at least. Vibhishana expresses himself in this way that we just read the quote, how he's surrendering everything. He's not feeling prideful. Now I finally got what I want or anything like that. He's just in the mood of service, whatever you want. Mood of service. In the commentary, it says he accepted the crown only because he could not disobey the orders of his chosen master, Lord Ram. He had a very strong mood of servitude, like Hanuman. Like Hanuman, not as much as Hanuman, but like Hanuman. And then there's a long discussion. He starts to do some service. So Ram asks him, please describe the power of Ravana and how the city is fortified, and that gets the lay of the land. He heard this already from Hanuman, but he's getting another first-hand report because Vibhishana knows everything. So Vibhishana tells him everything, holds back nothing. He just wants to be in service to Ram. And then Ram asks him another, do you have any recommendation how we can cross the ocean to get to Lanka? And the answer is given, well, one of your ancestors starts with an S, previous Sagara. King Sagara assisted the ocean in a very important way. And so the ocean personified is naturally going to want to reciprocate out of kindness, out of gratitude. There's some nice verses that describe this in the Ramayana. So Ram likes the idea. He does some fasting, but the ocean personified doesn't come. And so Ram decides to instruct, not just wait for the ocean personified to come. So there's different versions of Ramayana, some by his glance, some by his arrow. The ocean starts to boil, and all the aquatics are being boiled. And so ocean personified, or Samudra, or Varuna, different names are presented in different Ramayanas, come forward, and with folded palms offers prayers. What is, I didn't come because I didn't understand who you are. Now it's very clear. Please tell me what service you would like. Different paintings by different artists on this situation. So the suggestion is made to cross the ocean the way that they ended up crossing the ocean, build a bridge, and you'll get across. While this is going on, two spies come, Shuka and Sarana come, and they come disguised as Vanaras because they're shape-changing demons. But Vibhishan recognizes them, points them out, and, again, the Vanaras want to kill them. But Ram accepts them. He's very, very kind. Very, very kind. He accepts them. You see the two spies on the left there in their Rakshasa bodies. And it says something nice, that it happens twice. So Vibhishan is trying to assist Ram, and Ram is being very benevolent. This is a service, some of the services that Vibhishan does in his role. They're crossing the bridge, and as they're crossing the bridge, they start to consider what's next. And as they're considering what's next, naturally, they consult Vibhishan. We see in this painting, there's Vibhishan dressed in white. Behind him, Hanuman and Sugriva. Down below, there's Ram and Lakshman being carried by Vanaras, and so forth. So he assists Ram in making the battle plan because he knows the territory, and he knows the art of war, and he knows the Vedas. So he's a very reliable person to assist. Periodically, Vibhishan gives details about the various demons on Ravana's side and strategies and so forth and so on. He's a constant source of service. And now Ram doesn't need anything because he's omniscient and so on, but he's giving this nice devotee, Vibhishan, opportunity to render some service. This shows the same thing. Over on the right side, that's Lanka and its fortifications. On the left side is Vibhishan giving counsel to Ram about suggestions what to do. When they actually reach Lanka, a decision is made that some should rattle their cage, go to the various gates of Lanka palace and make havoc. And Ram decides to stay on a nearby mountain with his army. Now the next series of slides you saw yesterday, it has to do with the waking of Kumbhakarna. It's not the next thing that happens in the battle, but it has something to do with Vibhishan. So after Indrajit looked like he was going to be victorious, but he wasn't, Ravana was in anxiety. His invincible Indrajit son was baffled by the power of Ram, without the detail. So here's the images we saw. They want to wake Ravana wants to wake Kumbhakarna, and Kumbhakarna becomes wakened after much ordeal and starts eating left and right. Looks like he's eating an elephant. He comes before Ravan. Ravan asks him, go out there and let him have it. Kill the enemy. And Kumbhakarna is ready to go. There's a chariot taking him out to kill the enemy. Here's Sugriva doing battle with Kumbhakarna. Here's Kumbhakarna eating Vanaras, and the Vanaras throwing rocks and trees and everything at Kumbhakarna. Here's Ram confronting Kumbhakarna, and eventually the arrows of Ram is what kills Kumbhakarna. So when Kumbhakarna is killed, the reason for going through all this again is it brought about some regret in the very proud Ravana. Here's the verse from Ramayana, the Yuddha section. Since that venerable Vibhishana, my pious brother, was banished by me, this bitter fruit of that painful deed has come to me. So he's recognizing his insulting, not heeding and insulting and banishing Vibhishana was a big mistake. And he's reaping the fruits of that big mistake. So below on this slide you see names of demons that he sent forward and who killed them. And so that's the battle scene in Ramayana is very lengthy and detailed and full of excitement. The next involvement of Vibhishana, although he's on the battlefield when these other soldiers come out and generals come out and so forth, is when Indrajit is performing a yagya, kind of a black magic yagya, to bring about make himself invisible and bring about the destruction of the enemy. It's a very extended sacrifice. Vibhishana knows about it. He knows where to go, and he brings Lakshman to the place, and then there's a big battle between the two, and Lakshman kills Indrajit. So when Indrajit is killed, Ravana is like in disbelief. He's very attached to family members. Although they're expendable on the other hand, he is very attached to Indrajit. When Indrajit is killed, he becomes very sorry. There's things that happened that we discussed about Ravana. When the battle against Ravana is taking place, one of the final services, at least in terms of the battle is concerned, Vibhishana, Ravana tries to kill Ravana in many ways, nothing works. He pulls him to the side and it gives him the secret clue. In Ravana's heart is a store of celestial nectar which renews the life in his body. The only way to kill him is to strike at his heart with the divine weapon that can dry up the nectar. So that's what he does. Following the wise inside story of Ravana, he becomes destroyed because his brother gives the tip, the secret. So Ram invokes the Brahmastra weapon that he received from Agastya. He releases it, and Ravana is killed. And you see the demigods beating drums and showering flowers and on Lord Ramachandra. They're very happy. Vibhishana is beside himself with grief, although it was through his efforts that Ravana was killed. He has nonetheless some affection for his elder brother, a brotherly affection. And he laments in different ways. And Ram comforts him in different ways. Then comes this expression from Vibhishana that he doesn't want to do the funeral. He's the brother, the remaining brother, and there's funeral rites being done for everybody, even their demons. And Ram explains to him, it's your duty. Invokes the codes of the Vedas and the duty of the brother. And so he performs the funeral. And here's some old paintings. There's the wives, etc., lamenting over the death of Ravana. Here's on the left side is the flames and Ravana's body being burned. And Vibhishana is taking that responsibility. Here's a very complicated painting. On the lower right, that's the fire. And on the upper right, that's the anointing of Vibhishana as the king. In the lower left, it's the preliminaries to that ceremony. And same on the upper left. So it's already been performed, but now it's being performed again in the public assembly. Vibhishana is being anointed as the king. Now it's time for Ram to return. Vibhishana wants Ram to stay for some time, because after all of this, there's going to be turmoil. Ram says, I have to get back. Please find a way for me to get back quickly, because time is up and Bharata has taken a vow. If I don't return within 14 years, then he's going to finish his life, so I got to get back quickly. So he makes the arrangement for the Pushpaka Vimana that Ravana had taken from Kuvera, and has a long history of how that happened. And Ram goes back to Ayodhya and the Pushpaka Vimana, and there's several things that happen along the way. The Vanaras request a space on the Vimana. Vimana expands. They come with him. He returns back to Ayodhya. These are the queens. Kaikeyi is on the throne, and the two other queens are there. Ram's back in Ayodhya. The installation of Ram as king, and Sita by his side. Another very beautiful painting showing the demigods on the upper right attending the ceremony, and Sita and Ram seated on the royal throne. It's a very beautiful painting, very beautiful painting. The three queens are in white on the far right, because they're widows, and the rest of the assembly is there. Another more modern painting, and Vibhishana and everyone sent back. The Vanaras sent back, Vibhishana sent back after some time. And that's our description of Vibhishana. So, what is it important for us to remember about Vibhishana? He's the emblem of full surrender. That's the most important. He simply, in the mood of surrender, he just wanted to serve. He was in a compromised situation, but he didn't whine and complain about being in a compromised situation. He tried his best to be in service to Ram and service to righteousness and virtue, because that's a big part of the Ramayana's message, is following the path of righteousness and virtue. Big part of Ramayana. Big, not just part, essence of Ramayana. Along with surrender is that which enhances and facilitates surrender. So Vibhishana had all those qualifications, and all the while he was in the righteous position. When he had the opportunity for direct service, he was there, and Ram accepted him and engaged him, and he was very helpful. There's another section where we'll find this in Sundarakanda. Indrajit was not only like a really capable warrior, Indrajit was full of tricks. So one of the things that Indrajit did before he started this extensive yajna, he, by mystic power, he made a false Sita. There was another magician in Ravana's entourage who made a false head of Ram. But just as far as Vibhishana is concerned, Indrajit made a false Sita, showed the false Sita to Ravan, and then he brought that false Sita before Hanuman and chopped the false Sita's head. And Hanuman was devastated. Hanuman was devastated. So it was purposeful to weaken the heart of soft-hearted soldiers. Hanuman was devastated. But Vibhishana wasn't. Vibhishana knew it was a trick. Indrajit got all this bag of tricks. It wasn't real Sita. Not possible to kill Sita. So, Hanuman, don't become discouraged. Let's go with Lakshman. So together, Lakshman, led by Vibhishana, Lakshman and Hanuman went to where Indrajit was now doing his next thing, his black art yajna, and interrupted the yajna. But that will come, the details will come in Sundarakanda. So Vibhishana was, he was a spy. He had lots of inside information. He knew exactly where to go. It was in a remote place where Lakshman, where Indrajit was doing his yajna, and he knew exactly where to go. It was very helpful. So it's just part of war. It's good to have spies. Or they call it these days intelligence. To know what the other side is up to. And Vibhishana did that. He was very instrumental in bringing about the demise of Ravana. Of course, Ram doesn't need anybody's help to do anything, but he rendered that service, which was very nice. I'm trying to remember, if somebody knows the answer, could you send it into the chat box? I'm trying to remember when Vibhishana returned, there was a deity that had been worshipped by the Ikshvaku dynasty for some long time, and Vibhishana was given that deity. Something like that. So if somebody knows that history, please send it in. So let's see if there's some discussion. It's hour and 10 minutes after our starting time. We have 20 minutes before 9 o'clock.
Question, online question. Vibhishana is displaying the rare quality of deep faith in Lord
Deep
Ram.
what? Faith?
Faith in Lord Ram. That he is able to go against his wrongdoer brother and act in righteousness fully dependent on Lord Rama. I am curious to know, where did he hear about the Lord and whom did he serve to gain such a staunch faith?
Well, two things. Neither of these I'm aware of in any commentary or in any direct statements in Ramayana. But his bhakti came from his father, and two, he had, he is in a royal position. The royal people have privileges to receive information, like, the power of Ram and the beauty of Ram and this and that and the other of Ram. And just by hearing about him, he understood his position as a worthy person to take shelter of. Now, in the course of this whole Ramayana personalities discussion, there's going to be a presentation of these 18 points that Ramayana exhibits. So, Vibhishana plays a role in the process of surrender, but when one hears about the Supreme Lord, one may not have met him. You know, the only guru personality that we're aware of is his father, because the rest of his life he studied the Vedas, he read the Vedas, he must have studied under someone. At least while he was with his father, he studied under his father. But it's not that his father said, Lord Ramachandra is the personality Godhead, when you have the chance, surrender to him. But he gave him teachings of the scripture, and when he heard about Lord Ramachandra, he understood. And that's the place where he went. Something similar, it's not the same, but something similar to Muchukunda. When Muchukunda heard from Gargamuni about Krishna, he hadn't met Krishna, but he heard about Krishna, and he became his devotee. He just wanted to see him and serve him and surrender to him, just by hearing about him. It's not that Gargamuni was, giving a Bhagavad Gita class or a Bhagavatam class or detailed descriptions of Krishna. So we don't know of anything like that happening with Vibhishana either. But he heard about Ram and his power and his beauty and his everything. So that's where his faith went. Next.
Were you asking about Sri Ranganatha Swami temple that Vibhishana used to worship? The question is, did Vibhishana worship Sri Ranganatha Swami?
Does or did or?
I think did, Guru Maharaj.
We have there's no information on that. So, not likely, but no information.
Hare Krishna, Guru. Please accept my humble
Speak
obeisances.
slowly and clearly, please. Thank you.
Please accept my humble obeisances. Maharaj, Atma Nivedana example, is there any other example you could quote?
Yes, Bali Maharaj.
Okay.
Bali Maharaj is the person who Rupa Goswami points to. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.